Welcome to this session. Thank you very much, Elder Sequoia. So welcome to the closing session. We won't keep you too long. I think this is scheduled for 90 minutes, so we'll try and... No? No? Okay. I want to recognize, I've had such a day of such learning and such reflection for me personally, as well as I think for the support unit, for Health Research BC and all of our partner organizations. I recognize myself as a settler on these lands. I am Scottish. This is my family tartan, a MacLean tartan from the Isle of Skye. And I recognize that I'm a settler on these lands, and I've sometimes used the language of an uninvited guest. And I'm no longer going to use the language of an uninvited guest after what I heard today from Harlan Pruden. And thank you very much for that, because it makes absolutely no sense to describe someone as an uninvited guest. And what I commit to is being in good relations with the Coast Salish peoples. I want to know what I need to do to be in good relations with the Coast Salish peoples, and I commit to that. So that's one of my learnings from today, and recognizing myself as a settler on these lands. I'm incredibly grateful to be closing today's event. If we could put the slide up, please. And I want to begin, if we could put the slide up, please. Yeah, I want to begin by remembering a dear, dear colleague, Pat Atherton. Pat was actually the very first person I met when I started with the BC Support Unit in 2016 or 17. I should know the date. 16, thank you very much, Kent. And she was the very, very first person I met. She had such a warm embrace for me in my role. And very sadly, we lost Pat very suddenly in 2021. And BC lost a true champion for patient-oriented research. She said to me repeatedly, "Stirling, you rock." And she was the only person who's ever said that to me. And she said it with such, it was such a heartfelt comment. Now I know that she said to every single person she met, "You rock." She was just wonderful, just a wonderful champion for patient-oriented research. The other thing Pat did for me was she started my journey on learning about Indigenous cultural safety. She would sit down with me and explain to me why I needed to understand about colonization in a Canadian context, and the work that was before us in terms of decolonization and bringing Indigenous communities to actually have leadership in patient-oriented research. So I've got so much that I'm thankful for Pat for. The energy she brought to her work had a lasting impact on patient engagement in research in BC. She was an advocate for putting patients first. She organized, she was the person who organized and ran putting patients first. And she was an enthusiast for patient-oriented research and a visionary with the BC Support Unit. In honor, we launched the first Pat Atherton Emerging Scholars Award in 2022. We've actually had to take a sabbatical on that this year, but the award will resume in 2024 as part of the legacy Pat leaves to the BC Support Unit and to patient-oriented research in British Columbia. I think Pat would have been pleased with today's events. The sessions that we've had today, as I said, I've had huge learnings from the event today. The sessions demonstrated the breadth and strength of our shared work. They also illustrated the challenges that we need to address together. So as a provincial community, we have a rare opportunity to shape the future of patient-oriented research in BC and in all parts of the nation. I want you to look away at this point, because I don't want you to think that I'm reading from a script, but okay. Next, I'd like to welcome Leana Garraway, manager. Thank you. Leana is a popular person, I know, but please restrain yourselves. Next, I'd like to welcome Leana Garraway, manager of the Health Research Institute at the University of Northern British Columbia and the co-lead for the BC Support Unit Northern Centre. Leana, please share with us what you have learned today about the strategy for patient-oriented research.
Thank you so much, Stirling. Well, today was an amazing event. I just love that we were all here in person, and there's so many of us, and I loved getting to see people that I only know over Zoom, and learning the details about a lot of the work in POR that I knew of but didn't know the details of, or didn't know was occurring at all, through the different sessions and through the exhibitor booths. That was really fantastic. And what have I learned about SPORE during the conference? Well, I'd like to go back to Amy Lang's keynote, which I found just fantastic. I loved how you started it, Amy, situating yourself in your work. That's always just so fascinating. And how you acknowledged that we've done some really good work, some really good work's being done, but there's still a lot to go, and we are fragmented, and we need to work on, in particular, EDI, which then the plenary panel did such a wonderful job of further explaining. Focus on the truth and reconciliation call to action, and to really strengthen the connection between research and health policy. But because as a researcher at UNBC, I've known my whole career about the quote-unquote 17-year gap, and how we're working towards reducing that. So those are my main takeaways.
Great, thanks. And based on what you've learned from the conference, what's your advice for the future of the strategy for patient-oriented research?
So I think I've just answered the question.
Oh, right, okay.
I just sort of amalgamated it all, so I'm sorry.
This is a...
I didn't follow my my action items very well.
Okay, no worries. So I wanted to now move to one of our patient partners. Before I do that, can I just ask, if you're a patient partner, would you raise your hand? And can we give a round of applause to our patient partners? I say to my kids, it's not all about you, but actually now I'm going to say it is all about you. This work that we do is in order to improve the lives of people who have that lived experience of illness, of ill health, and of using the healthcare system. So I'd now like to invite Anni Rychtera to speak. Anni is part of the BC Support Unit's Patient Partner Working Group and sits on our unit's advisory council. And I think Anni is someone who is known to probably every single person in this room. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Anni for many, many years. So please share with us what you've learned from the conference, please, Anni.
Thank you, Stirling. I wanted to go back and really echo what you said about Pat Atherton. And as I was involved in the planning committee from the beginning for the first Putting Patient First conference till this one, and just honor Pat and her contribution. And when we see now how much work is involved of putting a conference like that up, and now with a bigger support system, and she was just amazing in the workload she did by herself with the help from a work group, but still. In terms of learning, so I want to make sure, I don't speak just for myself, I speak for all the 5 members, and I don't know if we have the slide for the 2 who are not here in person. You saw this morning Sherry and Swapnil, and these Lisa and Lynn, the members from the Advisory Council. So I reached out to all of them and asked about their feedback, their learning, and my comments reflect what I heard from them. So in terms of learning, it's just like for me, it was really good to hear that with the SPORE Refresh program, that the Pan-Canadian dialogue is ongoing, that there is ongoing support from the Ministry of Health as well as from the Canadian Institutes for Health Research. So that was reassuring, and I'd really liked also to comment what I heard in terms of funding and funding institutions, including charities. The question what was put out there, if you fund health research, fund patient-oriented research first and foremost, and so that's close to our hearts, and as I said in the beginning today, is like we want to make patient-oriented research the norm, not the exemption. I was asked from my colleagues to give a shout out. I don't know how many of you know that we had a meeting, a patient partner network meeting yesterday. We usually add that to the conference, this component. And there we had a report about a project. It's called the Patient-Initiated Research Assistance Program. We initiated that 2 years back. We started talking about that and putting some funds to the side to support that. And I was asked from one of my colleagues to really give a shout out to the Peer Up, that's the short form of it, project, and the concept that patient partners can initiate as well as lead or co-lead projects. The other learning was as well from the learning health systems, and to look at the health system, where did I my notes here, as an improvement to care delivery. Like, I personally don't really like the term learning health systems, but we have to work with that. And now it is what it is. But looking at it as an improvement of care delivery, implementation change. And change is positive. So with the work of everybody and the movements to initiate these changes is important.
Great, thank you so much, Annie, and the rest of our wonderful patient partners for the contributions you've made to the conference and to patient-oriented research in BC. My script now tells me that Stirling can provide his own comments in less than 3 minutes. So I'll go quick. First of all, I want to just say a huge thank you to Amy Lang. Amy, I really appreciate your willingness to share your personal journey, health journey, and the inspiration that gives you for the work you do in patient-oriented research. I hope it wasn't too much of an arm twist, but I think it really was a wonderful way of starting the conference today, and really appreciate you doing that for us. The message also, I think, from Amy's talk that I took away was the importance of the dual vision of SPORE. SPORE is about lived experience, perspectives at the heart of health research, but it's also about mobilizing that evidence to have impact and effect on both policy and practice. And I think we need to like keep firmly in our sights that dual goal of the dual vision of what we're trying to achieve. I was also inspired by the phrasing of Canada's strategy for patient-oriented research rather than CIHR's strategy. That actually, obviously, CIHR is putting in, I use the language shed load of money, but maybe that's not quite the language we should use, but but it's being matched dollar for dollar. And every province and territory is also putting in matching dollars. So it truly is Canada's strategy for patient-oriented research. I was inspired by notions of love in health research. I've never thought about the concept or the notion of love in the context of health research. And so I really appreciate almost like the opportunity to be able to talk in that way that Harlan Pruden provided, the importance of trust as a basis, and then reflecting on how do we actually build trust. And trust is built by being in good relations, and good relations with Indigenous peoples. In particular was the context in which he was talking, and that certainly resonates for me. But then where that leads to is actually our ability to talk about love in the context of the health research that we're doing, and meeting community where community is. And then the final thing that actually came from Harlan as well, I'm an economist, as many of you know, and so he used this phrase, I always look at the budget. And that, I think, is so important for us to reflect on, because it's his language as well, it's a statement of value. And of course it's a statement of value. So we should be thinking about how we structure our budgets, because we need to build those relationships. We need to have an underpinning of trust that comes in the research teams that we assemble. And we need to get to a point where we're thinking about love in the context of health research. So I always look at the budget, I think is good for us to reflect on as we come to the end of our session. So I apologize if I've not mentioned anyone else work that I was inspired by so much. One of the comment that was made to me by Tara McMillan was she made reference to this being an energizing event. And I think that's exactly what I've experienced today, is a sense in which we're now energized to move this work forward. And I really do feel that energy in the room. I hope you do as well. It's just me talking, but I can feel it. I can honestly feel it. So thank you, everyone who's contributed to this. So those are some thoughts from me. In the app, we've shared a link to a survey that asks your opinions on these very questions. So your responses will be synthesized and shared with CIHR to help inform the future of patient-oriented research in Canada. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention today. You'll also receive an evaluation email following the event, and we really do ask you to complete that for us so we can learn for future events. Before we close, I'm going to just say a few thank yous, and then I'm going to invite Elder Sequoia to do a closing prayer for us. So I'll just do a few thank yous before we close the event. We want to recognize all of the partners. This has been a special and an unusual Putting Patients First. It's not the BC Support Units conference, it's SPORE UNBC's conference. So our partners include the BC Network Environment for Indigenous Health Research, Canadian Primary Care Research Network, CanSolve CKD, ChildBright, Health Data Research Network Canada, and Passerelle, the national training entity, in addition to the BC Support Units. I'd like also to thank all of our plenary speakers, Amy Lang, Lydia Joy Marshall, Harlan Pruden, Erin Mahalik, and all of the session speakers. Thanks to the volunteers, of which there are many, who've helped to facilitate the event, moderators, and to our very special MC, Kim McGrail, who was very willing to be dragged to a microphone to act as our MC. So thank you so much for doing that for us. The planning committee has done exceptional work. It includes Emily Green, Maria, I never know how to pronounce your surname, I'm going to say Torrejon, but I know that's not right. So apologies, Maria. Michelle Duffy. I think Duffy is right. I hope so. Annika Chambers, Christine Ho, and Jen Parisi. And Jen has done an amazing job at the communications work, so thank you so much. Sally Clolford and her team have organized the event. So thanks to everyone who's joined us in Vancouver and everyone who's joined us online. I also want to just say a huge thank you to Elder Roberta Price, who started the day in such a wonderful way. And now I'm going to ask Elder Sequoia and Warnock, who will join us to do our closing ceremony. So thank you so much, Elder Sequoia, for doing that for us.